Hey everybody, David from Flash by Vcyclenut here. I have my MT10 up on the rear stand. I'm gonna try a different type of video, see how it goes. If it goes well, we'll make more of these. If people are like, that's silly, then I won't make any more of them. So today we're gonna talk about riding techniques, and specifically we're gonna talk about everything that we do with our right hand on corner entry. I've been riding at the track since the early 2000s, a little over 20 years. When I first started riding at the track and racing, I took several classes, including Keith Code, Superbike School. I've done Jason Pridmore School. I did Eric Wood School. And when we talked about using the front brake, not your initial hard braking, but at lean in, using it past tipping in, we always talked about using the front brake as trail braking and just using it to scrub speed. But now that I've taken the champ school a couple times, I use it in a completely different way, and it has really made me a much better rider on corner entry. On corner entry, on entry to the corner, we're doing a lot with our right hand. Lots of different motions, lots of different techniques. So we'll just start at the beginning of the corner, work our way through, and see how it goes. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to pretend we're going into a right-hand corner. And the first thing we're going to be, when we're headed down the straight, we're going to be fully tucked. Before we even pop up to hit the brakes, we want to get our butt off the seat. You don't want to be on the brakes, lift up and move. You want to be tucked, you want to move. And this is before we even come off the gas and go to the brakes. We want the least amount of forces going into the chassis of the bike as possible once we start doing things. So if we're braking really hard and then have to move our weight, which you'll see a lot of people doing it that way, it's just another force that the chassis has to deal with. So if we want to think about it one way, or the way I like to think about it is we're trying to go around the track as fast as we can with putting the least amount of forces into the chassis of the bike as possible. That gives the chassis, the suspension, makes its job the easiest. The more we move around, the more we hand fist inputs, the harder the inputs are, the more that the chassis. So we got our butt back. We have my reading glasses out the way, it's not getting old. We have our chin on the tank, we're fully tucked. We are full throttle. We move our butt over. We see our brake marker coming. So what the next steps that we're gonna do, this one's one of the hardest ones for me to work on. I like to use both brakes. They're there for a reason. People like to argue you don't need a back brake. It's silly. If you didn't need a back brake, MotoGP and race bikes would not have them. They do, and the back brake serves a purpose. People will argue that the back brake is not needed because when you're braking really hard on the front brake, that the back tire is off the ground, so it does no good. But this is not the time that we really use the back brake. We want to use the back brake when we first apply the brakes. By using the back brake, you will actually have the chassis squat down. When the chassis squats, this allows you to use more front brake pressure. So as soon as we're going to the brakes, we're going to go to the front brakes and the back brakes at the same time. You can use more back brake initially, and you will lighten up on the back brake as we get to harder front braking pressure. The part that I struggle with the most is when we're full throttle and we roll off the gas, there should be no time distance between, it's not roll off the gas and then go to the brakes, but it should be roll off the brake gas to the brakes. So there's three things you're doing at once. You're full throttle, you pop up, you roll off the gas to the brakes, and you apply back brake. All in one motion. Now, what makes that, for me, besides just rolling off to the brakes, is that our initial braking should be very light. On a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being squeezing it for all it's worth, a 1 being just barely touching the brake pads to the rotors. At champ school, they like to say use a 1. So there's a lot going on. You have 3 motions that are really kind of quick and with force. The back brake popping up, rolling off the gas to the brakes. But the first initial brake should be light. Just bringing those pads to the rotors. Once it doesn't have to be a long period of that, it just brakes to the rotors, then you can progressively start to squeeze harder. So our butt is off the seat. We have gone from transitioning from wide open throttle to closed throttle, squeeze the brake, the 1%, we have the rear brake on. We're now, once we start to apply the pressure on the brake, we're now going to progressively increase our front brake pressure and decrease our back brake pressure. And we're looking for our turn-in spot. So previously, before the Champ School, I would get to almost no brake pressure or brakes completely off before I would make my steering input. So if we're gonna go on a right-hander, before I would push and pull on the handlebars to get the bike to go right. What the difference is now is that I'm using the brakes, the front brake, until I'm happy with my speed and direction. And what that looks like is if we are going to take maximum braking force and the front force are going to be dove completely down as they go, ideally, or if you're using this for max effect, you're going to come off a little bit, let the suspension come up about 20 millimeters in the stroke, and that is where you're going to leave the pressure and go into the corner. Now for me personally, this is something I've been working on for a little while, and I'm still not that hard on the brakes on turn-in, but I am definitely on the brakes and down into the stroke of the suspension. And once you get used to this, it really does a few things. One is it really moves your brake markers up forward, right? Because if in the plan that I have for this corner that I'm going to apply the brakes right down to the apex, then I can start my braking marker sooner because I'm going to have pretty decent braking force up to the apex. Not every corner is up to the apex, depends on the corner, but at least in initial entry and turn-in, I am going to be deep down on the suspension. And at Champ School, they had a video that they ran. I think it was Neil Hodgson, who's a world champion, and they showed this on his bike where they had cameras on the travel, and it was amazing how deep he was into the travel on turn-in and all the way through. So a couple keys, or one of the big keys with this is, if you're going to be using this technique and you're going to be deep in the lean angle on your knee with the brakes applied, how you let go of the brakes is very important. If I just let go, the front suspension is going to pop up, I'm going to unweight my front tire, and I'm going to lose the front. So as you're coming in and as you're loosening the brakes are just a nice easy go away, not let go. I also, I have a problem with a lot of times where I think I'm full throttle down the straightaway, and I have my wrist turned as much as I'm comfortable, and then I realize I have more throttle. So I've added a step that when I fully let go of the brakes, I just reposition my wrist a little bit so that I know when I turn my wrist to get full throttle, I get full throttle. So the last part of braking looks like this, free grip, and then again, applying gas, and that initial transition from closed throttle to open throttle needs to be nice and smooth. We don't want to upset the chassis. We want it to be a smooth transition. This is one of the reasons why when I'm tuning a bike, I work really hard on that transition from closed throttle to open throttle to allow you to pick it up clean. A lot of stock bikes, it's really difficult or impossible, depending on the RPM you're at and where you're at, to really transition from closed throttle. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video. Let me know down below what you think, if anything I should add or anything I missed, or if I should continue to do them or just stop because I'm horrible. And remember to hit that subscribe button if you want more motorcycle related content. Thanks guys.